Okay, it looks like we're live. So see if you can see it on your page.
I can see it. Am I in the middle of the screen? I feel like, okay.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Did you share it?
Oh, wait. On my Facebook page? Is that what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Oh, so I have to go to your page. I got you. Let's see. I see it. And I'm going to and just share it, right?
Yeah, that's all you got to do.
All right, cool. Done.
Okay.
Done deal. I think. Okay. Yep. Good.
All right. We are officially live. Welcome to the Practical Magic Show, episode 6. We're talking to Devon Bandison today about creating exponential results in your life by dropping your past. I'm unbelievably excited. I say that every week, but it gets truer actually every week for a couple of reasons. One, because Devon is my coach. And so there's like this cool, different, fun, playful edge for me in this conversation, but also because Devon is an absolute magician and master of creating new possibility from a totally blank slate, which I say, and as I say, like really excited to learn about because I don't even really know what I'm saying when I say that. And so I'm really excited to learn it from you today. But I'll tell everyone a little bit about who you are, which is you're a phenomenally successful coach, a best-selling author of a book called Fatherhood is Leadership. You're my coach, the creator of an incredible live weekend called the Game Changer Weekend, and a father, which I know is a huge, huge element and important aspect to who you are in the world. You know, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you here today, aside from the fact that like up until today, I have felt like I can pretty much hang a little bit with my guest. And today I kind of feel like, man, I don't know. And so I'm excited to be here really learning in this different capacity, but also because if you look at your past, it's not like your past circumstances necessarily set you up on a trajectory to be where you are, which is why I am, you know, I'm excited about who you are and what you have to bring because you totally created this life from scratch, essentially. So thank you for being here, and I'm excited to dive in. So tell me if I missed anything or if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, no, I think, like I said before the show, you have an amazing way of creating people. And just to add what you said, if there's someone who shouldn't be at the place where I'm at right now, it's probably me based on past history. So I think that's the good news, right? That our past doesn't need to equal our future and we don't have to recycle it. So I'm just excited. The Magic Show, I must say, Vanessa, this isn't just, I mentioned this a little before, that how you set up this show, this isn't like a show about magic. This is actually the being of magic. So when I woke up today, I got an email from you and your people, right? You know you've arrived when you got your people. So your people sent me this email and right away, there was this connection and this sense of magic. Like, it was in who I was being. I was excited. I was inspired in how I showed up for the rest of my day leading up to right now. So I just acknowledge you for putting this together. Your past guests have been amazing. And, let's have some fun.
Cool. Thank you. And I, it could be fun to bring that in too. So feel free to weave that in. So one of the things that I would love to kick it off with is when we talk about not bringing the past into the future, not recycling your past into the future. I'd like to slow this down for a minute right off the bat and say, what does that really mean? Like, let's define what the past means, because the past could mean your childhood. But as I'm starting to understand from working with you, the past can also mean like 5 minutes ago, yesterday. And so can you just define that for a minute or open that up a little bit?
Yeah, I think, my daughter, you see the clock behind me. She says, "Only you, Dad." Is my clock is always the same time, which just says it's now. It's like we have access to everything in our life once we realize that the only time we ever have is right now. So we have kind of all the time in the world because we have the infinite time of right now. to create. And when I talk about, the past, there's stuff in the childhood and there's stuff 5 minutes ago, like you said. Oftentimes there's some kind of split at an early age, right? There's a split from my natural magical self. Life is all it is. There's no wrongness in the world. And there's a split that usually happens, usually around between 0 and 6 years old, when the first time our magical selves start realizing, oh, something is wrong here. And oftentimes from that split, we create a personality. It's like a fight or flight personality, right? In order to be protected from what we think we're fearful of or we think could hurt us. And oftentimes we play out that story, we play out that play for our whole life. And the tricky part is sometimes the personalities we take on serves us. It really helps us to kind of get through some of the most difficult challenges. It allows us to be resilient. So it's almost like what got us there, what got us here is not going to get us there. So it serves us until it doesn't serve us anymore. So whenever I know we talked about like personality tests or which are great tools, but people take it as if it's a fixed way of being, that I'm a 7 on the Enneagram because that's what I am. I actually think it's the opposite. It actually shows you who you're not. It is actually showed who you created yourself to be as a personality based on that split. So oftentimes what we do is we're basing our present, our decisions, our relationships, our relationship to money on something that isn't even here right now. It's something that we've carried over to from the past. So we never have a future anymore. All we have is a recycled past. So that's why people get caught up in the personal development world. I want to be better, right? I want to be different. But what is better and different? Different from when? The past. Better from when? The past. So for me, when I work with people, it's like, I'm not trying to get you better or different. I'm not trying to get you somewhere. I'm trying to actually get you back to nothing, to a blank slate, to like a canvas. Right? Because from nothing, what is able to be created from nothing?
Anything.
That's a question. Anything, right? So if we can get to nothing, no past, no story that is here on this canvas, no line on the canvas, we could create anything. But often what we do is we have a canvas and we have a couple lines on it from the past, and we think we're going to create a new masterpiece. But we can't create a new masterpiece when there's lines on the canvas from the past. We're just adding to the past. So the work is really to get back to nothingness, to your natural state of being. So that's a quick version.
I'm so glad that you brought up that, because I know that we had that in one of our first conversations. You talked about this model of a staircase versus, I don't know, it was just an arrow really was the alternative. And you talked about when we just want to create something a little bit better, we end up with something that really just looks like the past over and over and over again. Can you, because this is one of those things that you can, I don't know about the people watching, but I can feel in my body as true more than my mind can really grasp onto it. Is it okay if we slow this down even a little bit more and talk about what does that really look like? In terms of like what someone's actually thinking about themselves and what they're wanting instead, and how going through this model that you're talking about has them end up with kind of like the same version of what they had before.
Yeah, great question. You are like the real deal in this thing. I love how you move this forward. So anyway, sometimes, as you know, for me, I'm a New Yorker. I take what I call station breaks. So I go, but trust me, I come back once in a while. I'll come back to a conversation. So let me give you a real life example of kind of a creation, change versus transformation or a breakthrough.
Well, I love this.
Yeah. So a change is, like you said, the steps. So it would look like this, right? This is what a step. You see? So a change, I'm going through a difficult divorce years ago, right? I'm going through a difficult divorce because, I'm from New York. The only divorces I ever heard from was difficult. I hadn't traveled to California yet and heard this thing called conscious uncoupling, right? So I'm going through a difficult divorce because I say it's a difficult divorce. And every time I go to pick up my son, there's friction, there's difficulty, right? So I come home and I try to change. I try to be a little better than the last time. I do things like, last time it didn't work when I asked her that question. And so I'm going to be a little better. I'm going to be a little different. I'm going to practice more integrity. I'm going to practice more patience. And what will happen is it's like that staircase. So I go and it would work for a minute, it would work for a minute, but eventually there would be a conversation like, I can only take too much. And at that point, what would happen? I would default back to the same behavior. So that is like change. It's like I'm trying to be a little better than, a little different. A breakthrough looks like this. Bam.
Wait, pull it over this way a little bit. Yeah.
Just starts here. There's no like steps. It's bam and then bam. So I wake up one morning. I'm in the shower where a lot of my insights come. And all of a sudden, it occurs to me that this no longer is a difficult divorce. It's no longer a difficult divorce. Like, it's a consideration. Like, our life is created by a consideration. Like, if you consider I love you, then I love you. Check that out, right? If you consider this to be the magic show, it is so. It is the magic show. I wake up in the shower. I don't wake up in the shower. I wake up and get in the shower, and all of a sudden, it's no longer a difficult. Now, the circumstances hasn't changed in my divorce. I keep picking up my son. My ex-wife is acting however she acts, and yet who I'm being in that is not the same person. It's not someone who's changed from the past. It's someone who is being love. It's someone who is being patience, not changing to being more patient. And from that, I created myself as I am the best ex-husband ever. And I continued to be that when I picked up my son, and it took about 9 months. I never said those words to my ex-wife. At one point, she turns to me and says, "Do you want to have a conversation?" I say, "Yes." So she has a conversation. Her and I now are like best friends. About a year after that creation, that transformation, that this is a return to who I naturally am, which is love and being, right? We're out, and she introduces me to her friends and said, "I want to introduce you to someone." And she says, "This is the best ex-husband ever." And right. And I never said those. I never was like, "Hey, I'm doing this personal development work that, I created myself." No. It was in the way of being. And to me, that is where a past is no longer my present or my future. It's a creation. Every time I showed up, it was a creation. And just know that's what magic to me is. It's like being it's actually not that deep. Like, let me give you like the definition I got, right? Because I love words. The definition of magic is the power of apparently influencing the course of events by using mystical or supernatural forces. Now, the key to that word, that definition to me, is actually apparently. Because the definition of apparently is as far as one can see. So the magic that is created, right, is actually always here. It's actually right here. It's our natural state is that state before the split as a 6-year-old. And like what magic is to me is being with life in a way, in a flow that's actually our natural way of being, so that you influence events because you're actually being with the event, if that makes sense. And in this place, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I could go on and on.
No, you're good. I'm just like, wait.
Yeah, sorry. Let's stop at the story of my divorce. You want to start there? Like, I should have stopped there.
I want to zero in a tiny bit on this definition, because what I'm hearing, and I want to know if I'm hearing it right, is when you say apparently, so it's influencing your environment with mystical forces, supernatural forces, as far as you can see. And yeah. I feel like that, like you said, is the key word. And I want to go back to the all of a sudden moment that you had. But before we do, it's like, that feels really important, because I feel like if there was something that limited someone's magic, speaking for a friend, it would be that you're trying to influence your world beyond where you can see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the world in which you're tapping into, it's kind of like the Rumi, the beautiful Rumi quote of like out there, right? Beyond right doing and wrong doing, there's a field, right? So this is what we're talking about actually now. Now that I've grounded it in a definition, we could go a little woo-woo, right? There is actually a field there, right? Some call it the quantum field. So what happens is, to me, as far as I can see, speaks to conditioning. See, we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned that we have to get to magic. Like I've heard conversations around being in the zone, right? Or being in the flow. Like I work with a lot of athletes. I was a college athlete, and I always ask them the same question about being in the zone and being in the flow. Now, what they always say is the game came easy. It was effortless. I was allowing. The game slowed down. Now, the game didn't literally slow down. They just were so present and in it. They were with everything so much that the game looked slow. So here's the thing. We've been conditioned to think that our natural state is not in the zone, so we have to get in the zone. So when we talk about apparently, as far as we can see, most of us see magic as something to get to or something that's outside of us. But what it is actually is a return to who we naturally are. We naturally are. Without separation, we are love. Without separation, we are magnificent. Without separation, we are extraordinary. But when we go outside for the answer, and when I say outside, I mean this concept of dual, of there's me and there's you. When we realize that is actually all in that field for access to us, we're actually returning to who we naturally are. So for magic, for me, Vanessa, is an allowance. It's an allowance to be with life in such a way in which I use it and it uses me. It's like a dance. And to me, from that, everything is effortless. Everything is in flow. And that is, to me, the most beautiful part of life. When people realize that they are actually the source of their own life.
So is that what happened for you in that moment where you said, all of a sudden, it was no longer a difficult divorce? Because I really want to slow down to that. What happened in that all of a sudden moment that allowed you to choose? Because ultimately that's what you did, right? You chose a different path, but it's hard, especially like divorce is up there with death of a loved one. Like it doesn't get much harder of a life experience than that from our society perspective, right? But you chose something else. How did you do that?
Yeah. So in the moment, what you connect to in magic, to me, is allowing and being with what is. There was no longer she should act this way, it should be this way. It was an allowance of how life was, loving every part of it, of whatever it was. When that happens and I'm open and I'm not just, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. When I release all of that, I get centered to source. And to me, that's what occurred in the shower. I got all the barriers from who I really am out of the way and was able to connect to source. So most people, the circumstances of their life dictates kind of whether they're happy, whether they're sad, whether they're good, whether they're bad. And I love that you use the death analogy. Like, if you go to a funeral and you have two sisters, one sister is like rolling all over the floor, booger snots coming out the nose. There's nothing wrong with how she's responding. But there's another sister who's there and just joyful, who's just like celebrating life. It's the same circumstance and two different relationships to those circumstances. So whenever we are in magic, whenever we are being with what is, right? Whenever we're not judging good versus bad, then what happens is it opens up that the path to that field in which anything's possible. And most people don't want to let go of their judgments. A lot of people, they think they do. They don't want to let go of their limiting beliefs. So they hold on to this and then wonder why it's not happening the way they think that it could.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like what you're saying is, and you didn't say this, but when you really are experiencing your circumstances without any resistance, you're just looking at literally what is happening. You have the opportunity to tap into source, that field of unlimited potential to create a different future. But if you don't, if you stay connected and you stay attached and you stay in your judgments and you stay in your resistance, most likely what's going to occur next is going to be some reflection of the past.
Correct. Because what are we sticking to? We're sticking to an old story of what we're associating this to. We're actually not living life in as is reality. We're not living life in how it is. We're living life in how we're thinking and bringing past stories to it. So when I allow that to disappear, I can dance with life in such a present, connected to source way. And in that, to me, that's where creation happens. That's where everything, there's an allowance. There's no force. Time and space really are irrelevant because there's an inner knowing in this creation.
So I want to slow one more thing down. And then I feel like we really have captured the totality of like what it means to be in the past versus the present. You said, how we know we're in the past is by the stories that we're talking about what happened, telling ourselves about what happened. The first thing that I become aware of in myself is the majority of the time I'm not aware of the story I'm telling myself about what's happening. I'm just aware of how I feel about what's happening. I'll actually share a little bit of a story. This morning, my husband's watching, so hey, hon, this is about us.
Hey, brother.
He was leaving for work and he was kind of running late and he was looking for the keys and he couldn't find them because they were in my pocket in a coat, which I did not know where it was. And he was getting super agitated and he was following me around and I was getting really stressed. I'm like, oh, don't breathe down my neck because then I can't think about where the keys are. And so I finally found them and he went to work and I found myself even like an hour and a half later, I was still feeling agitated and anxious. And I went for a walk and I couldn't shake this feeling. And I had your voice in my head and I was saying, all right, who would I be without the story? But I didn't know what story I was stuck in. I just knew I felt anxious. I knew it was about the interaction. It was like 2 minutes, right? 2 hours later, I'm still feeling anxious. And I realized like, I didn't really identify the story itself, but I said, well, what if I approached this moment as if it was the first time there was ever an interaction like this between he and I? Yeah. Now, just for a little backstory, I'm always losing stuff. I'm always, holding us up. So that story was wrapped up in there. And what occurred to me was, one, I probably wouldn't still be upset about it. Two, I would have maybe even been compassionate because he was late and he was stressed and I've been there. And I might have even been like actually apologetic because I lost the keys and that's irritating when that happens to me. So is that an example of what you're talking about, where if we slow down enough, and as I did that, I had to do it out loud, like for a couple minutes for that feeling to really drop away. And when it did, I felt fine.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, it's like, I love that example. It's like you questioned the belief, right? There was a story of like, hey, I lose my keys all the time, or he's getting on my nerves. And then like when you question it and say, who would I be without that? I would be present. I would be loved. And I need to say, Vanessa, when we're more unconscious, this is all of us. This is the human condition. We are meaning maker machines. Like our job when we're in unconsciousness is to make meaning of everything, right? There's really no meaning to anything until we give it meaning, right? So the questioning, when I did work with Byron Katie, and what I love about Byron Katie, who's a woman who does, some of your people will know who she is, some may not. She does some really great work called The Work. where it is really just questioning these beliefs. And one, narcissism is like, just because I have a thought, I believe it's true. Right. And it's the questioning of like, why am I giving this thought so much attention, but the other thought that told me like how magnificent I was, I don't give that any attention. Right. It's just, they're just like clouds. Like, so, but sometimes we over analyze, or we over connect with these thoughts that are just meant to come and go. And I love that you slowed it down. The other danger is like, we can't create a story about having a story, right? We can't make having a story bad either, because that is we're meaning making machines. So this is just a practice. This is just an awareness. This is just consciousness, right? That when we are naturally in our state, there's just an allowance. There is just us. There's just this oneness in which we can operate and create whatever we want to create. So I love that example. And I think that, someone's out here, right? It's just like, if I want to create a business that's $1 million, and someone comes to me and I ask them, well, have you ever created $1 million before? And they say, well, I never did, but I want to do it in 3 months. I let them know, like, this is like the athlete who averages 7 points a game telling me in 3 months he's going to average 50 points a game, right? Right. So it's, and I say that because what my point is, who you were being to average 7 points a game cannot be the person you bring in here to be in creating $1 million. So my first question is never, what do we need to do? What is the doing? My first inquiry with them is, well, who do you need to be? Who is a person who creates that in their life? What are the things that when they show up, who are they being on the everyday, interactions with the world, interactions with money, interactions with opportunities? Who is that? And that's a creation. That's a creation. For us to get there, we have to get to nothing first. We have to make sure that we're not pulling some of that old 7 point a game person in here thinking that, hey, if I just add 43 to this, I'll have 50. No. We need to almost get rid of that, not almost, and create from scratch, like an empty canvas.
I love that you perfectly transitioned us a little bit into the how to create, right? I think we've covered a massive chunk of how to drop the past in a short time. But you say, who do you need to be? And that's a great question. And it's so opposite our conditioning. So let's say that you ask me that question. I say, what $1 million business? Well, I need to be creative and playful and open and bold. That's what I say. Consistent, and yeah, that's good. And I wake up and I feel like none of those things. And it feels like so much work to get to that state of being that it would almost be easier just to like do stuff, right? Because that's my experience anyway. So how do you shift that?
Yeah. So most people think that because I feel something, that needs to leak into who I'm being. Somebody once told me it's your feelings ain't a fact. It's just a fact that you feel, right? So sometimes we have a feeling. I don't feel like getting on the Peloton, but the way of being in which you said you want to create from is consistency. So just because I don't feel like it, there's a choice. Do I live life in how I'm feeling all the time? Or do I live life in who I'm being? I could come on this show right now and I come in like this. Yeah, like think of a word when I come on and you see me like this. What's the word? Give me a word. Huh?
Rushed, stressed,
right? Or I could come on and I'm like, come in, give me a word.
Present.
Okay. So before I got on this call, those two different scenarios, I got a phone call from my father. He's in the hospital. I'm feeling a little concerned about my father. Who I choose to be on this call is up to me. right? So my daughter calls me and she says, "Hey, Dad, how you feeling?" I said, "I'm a little angry at your brother. Do you want me to operate with you on how I'm feeling or who I'm being?" She always picks being, right? So we have to challenge this thought that, like, because I feel a way, that's what I need to be. How you feel doesn't need to leak into who you're being all the time. Sometimes we're going to feel sad. Sometimes we're going to feel down. Sometimes we're going to feel unmotivated. That has nothing to do with who we're being.
So who you're being is a moment by moment choice then.
That's it. That's all we have is moment by moment. Life is never in a future or a past. Life is now, followed by now, followed by now. That's it. Even if I said, let's meet next week, Thursday, by the time we met next week, Thursday, we would be in the now. So the suffering in our lives often, usually only comes when we're either stuck in a past or in a future. There's really no suffering right here, right now.
So would it be fair to say that, let's say you have this example where the Peloton example, and you're not being consistent because you don't feel like going and you're not feeling motivated. Would it be a fair tool to say, let's say you have your list of the things, the qualities you need to be to create this future that you want, and you first identify how you're feeling, which is, I don't feel motivated. I'm kind of just playing in my own mind here, thinking of, like, okay, let's say I have my list on my wall of who I need to be to create what I want, to say, if I were being consistent, what choice would I make? And just to kind of offer yourself a different frame of mind, because if you are stuck in that feeling, the quality of your actions or probably and your choices are going to come from, I'm not feeling motivated. So I could see you slipping into some rationalization and talking yourself out of it. You're trying to solve a problem from the same state of being that you're in, right? So does that seem reasonable?
It's like a life consciousness hack, right? So it gives you access, right? So when I was picking up my son and my ex-wife would be arguing, I would go and say, okay, what would the best ex-husband ever do here? What would the best ex-husband say here? How would the best ex-husband? So that, to me, that was the practice, right? And the more you build that muscle of practice, here's the jackpot that we don't realize, that in who we are being, love, creation, all of that, it's actually who we naturally are. But we've been so conditioned that sometimes we have to create this life hack, this practice to get us on the path to realize what we've already known, that this was always in us the whole time.
That's it. Oh, I was looking for, like, where's the thing? And that was it. Like, that's the thing that loops it back, because what I was going to ask was, does it, like, just get easier? And the answer has to be yes, because ultimately it must feel so much better to just land in the state of who you are, that it's actually the conditioning. Because you said before, creating who you're being is a creation. But what I actually just heard is, what you're really actually doing in creating yourself as this blank slate possibility is you're actually uncreating who you're not.
Right.
Exactly. Who you are. Do I get it?
That's it. Absolutely it. 100%. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I have one more question, and take your time with it, because it's a big one. But talk us through how, when you arrive at that state or in this process, what is the impact to the 50-point game, the $1 million business? How does this create? I can totally see how the inner transformation works. How does this shift the external results in your working towards your goals and the things that you want in your life?
Yeah. So it's like two projects, right? It's like the game of life and living life, right? In certain places, they may call it the goal line and the soul line, right? So when you kind of, for me, in the work with people, when you get out of the way, these limiting beliefs, these things that, like, are getting in the way of you actually being your natural, beautiful, magnificent self. The access to creation, to achieving on the game of life, the $1 million, the marriage, the successful relationship, whatever it is, you have such a different access point because you're beyond the past stories and judgments, and it allows you to be in that flow, in that zone that we talk about with athletes, where the game just slows down, where there's ease, where there's effortless. That doesn't mean there isn't circumstances that come up. Sometimes it's just how you relate to it. So when you're working on that inner work, when you're working on who you're being, it's almost like that essence of who you are is gonna have an impact on everything you touch. You're gonna see things differently. You're gonna hear things differently. You're going to be a different way. And most people are missing opportunities for love. Most people are missing opportunities for abundance because it's actually right there in front of them. But because they have so many barriers to see things for what they are, that it gets in the way of it. So that's how the work opens it up.
I can see that. I mean, even just the example that I gave this morning, as I did the work on my way home and I started to feel better, I was like, man, I just missed like 90 minutes with my kid and my mom. Like, that was a bummer. That's like,
Yeah.
So I can see that. What it made me think of when you were talking about is the word apparently.
Yeah.
That you can see more of what's in front of you. And so when you, and tell me if I have this right, but when you see more of what's in front of you, different action becomes obvious. Other opportunities you didn't see before become obvious, and how you relate to them and then act upon those is really different. The Peloton example, you get on the bike over and over and over and over again, where you might not otherwise, and you lose the weight, or you increase your conditioning, or you call the person that you were avoiding, or you see a person that you didn't see in a different way. Am I getting that?
100%. It's like in horse racing, horses sometimes have blinders. And the blinders is so they don't get like distracted and they can look at the certain goal, right? And that works for a certain achievement thing, right? Like you can achieve certain things with the blinders. Mm-hmm. But when you are actually opening up consciousness, it's the blinders are off. And in sports, when someone's really good and they're in the zone, they have a saying that says, man, he has eyes in back of his head. Now, he doesn't literally have eyes in back of his head, but because his consciousness is expanding, because he's in such a flow zone state, he can see things that other people can't see. And it's the same thing that we're talking about here in life. That relationship that was headed for a divorce, when the consciousness expands, the possibility of having this, not only, I had someone come to my Game Changer weekend who was in the midst of a divorce, and by Monday recreated their whole relationship as the most loving relationship ever. I had a guy come in on a Friday, was going to fire this guy on a Monday, and recreated that whole relationship in a weekend. And now that guy is his succession plan to take over as CEO from him.
Wow.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, like, as we open up consciousness and as we get rid of and drop all the old stories, all we're left is possibilities. There's no limitation to how this relationship could be. There's no limitation of where I can take my business. There's no limitation of who I want to be. I want to be, I was a best-selling author before I even wrote a book. I used to write like terrible blogs, right? Because I didn't want to write blogs. And I remember a client was like buttering me up and like, hey, you want to send me those blogs to look over? I'm like, oh, you're telling me I can't write? But like, for me, I was being that before it even came out in the world. Mm-hmm. So when we take the blinders off, anything's possible, and we create. And the world, there's an allowance and there's action, right? There's an allowance of allowing the world to be what it is. There's no right and wrong. And then the universe responds to your action in that, in who you're being in relationship to that. And that's to me joy. That's flow. That's
magic.
Yeah, that's magic.
That seems like a perfect place to end it. I actually can't wait to go back and listen to this conversation again and soak even more of it in, because this was I mean, all my time with you is valuable, but this was incredible. So thank you so much. One of the things I'll just kind of share with you, you don't know this, but neither does anybody watching. One of the additions that Sarah and I are creating from this show is we're actually creating a toolkit from every guest. So there's all kinds of amazing tools that you've just offered in the form of this conversational wisdom that we will be putting together. So if you want that, I think there's a link in the description, or there will be, where you can sign up for that. And we'll obviously be sending that to you too, Devon. So how can those of you who were mind blown and intrigued and connected to you spend more time with you?
Just reach out. My name is Devon Bandison. I'm on anything, Instagram, Facebook, emails, Devon Bandison. So whatever, just hit me up. I'm around, I'm accessible, and I'm out here in the world. So
very cool. Well, thank you so much. If this show resonated with you, and I can't imagine that it didn't, please share it with someone that you know that could really benefit from it. And if Devon inspired you, which I'm sure he did, he is fun and personable and accessible and easy to get a hold of. So reach out and connect with him as well. Thank you, Devon, so much.
Thank you, Vanessa. Great job. Love you. And talk to you soon.
Bye.